looking at him.
All right, that's
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, if you could sort of tell us about what's been happening in the last decade or so in the Indian art scene. More artists. I mean, just tell us generally what's going on,
There's
trend-wise.
been a huge explosion over the last decade. I think sort of as India has opened up to the world, Indian artists have had the chance to absorb a lot of influences, but they come from a very strong tradition, a local tradition of iconography, and so there's been this quite exciting period of people sort of mixing and matching traditions or using influences from outside to really strengthen an Indian tradition of art. And the art market, if that's any indication of anything, is going through the roof. Uh, Sort of paintings is now some paintings have sold for in excess of $1 million, and there are serious collectors from around the world who are now collecting Indian art. There's a guy called Frank Cohen, who's a British guy, who was collecting, for instance, the young British artists much before anybody had heard of them, Damien Hirst and the lot. He's now sort of turned his attention to India and is collecting a lot of pieces here. MoMA and some of the big galleries from around the world are also looking to build their India collection. So there's a lot happening.
Has MoMA featured any Indian art yet?
I don't think in a large show yet,
Okay.
but sort of we're always told that their curators are sniffing around.
Really?
So,
You talked about icons, the tradition of using icons. We saw
mm,
the other day an artist that incorporated Shiva into everything.
right.
It was really interesting. It was really bright painting. Um, so I guess culturally, is this a good thing for India because it's sort of cementing cultural traditions in sort of a new art form that's becoming more popular? I mean, that's a terrible question, but
Yeah, no, I think sort of one of the astonishing things about Indian culture has been its ability to absorb all sorts of things and
yeah.
make them specifically Indian.
Uh-huh.
So, for instance, among the most popular forms of cuisine is Chinese food, or what we define as Chinese food, but sort of our neighbors in China would never recognize it for the kind of food they eat, except for the fact that it has a few noodles in it. And sort of, we take this stuff and we make it our own. And sort of, I think we have, as a culture, we have a tremendous capacity to absorb all sorts of things and then, sort of put our stamp on them. And that's happening now at an even more accelerated pace in many fields of culture.
Great.
I think sort of the one area it's really visible is Indian writing in English. Sort of suddenly you have people like Salman Rushdie, but also Vikram Seth, Vikram Ghosh, Amitav Ghosh. Sort of people who are really making big statements about the world in the novel, which is essentially a Western form.
Yeah.
and what?
Uh,
Oh, okay.
No, I was just as an aside. I was going to say I tried the Chinese food last night. We were at the Bombay Gym. One of the
right. Yeah.
Indian journalists is a member,
Right.
and we had the Chinese, and it was good. It was spicy.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead with your
Oh,
question.
I was just going to say, you spoke to sort of India's ability to make its credit in
Mm.
culture. What is specifically unique about Indian art right now? What kind of elements are they blending together? What are they creating that's new?
All sorts of things. But I suppose sort of sort of Indian art has really developed since the 40s, when there was something called the Progressive Artists Movement, which was a bunch of essentially Bombay artists who were looking to find a way in a newly independent nation to tell the stories of this newly emerging nation. And suddenly this stuff is all over the place. I mean, there are people doing new media art, there's a little sculpture, uh, this painting of all sorts, from sort of from miniatures to large, really giant canvases. There's nothing that really defines it, I think, except for a sense of experimentation and exploration.
So it's kind of exploding and going in all different directions?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, it's just taking whatever's happening around the world. I mean, new media art, for instance, video art, that's happening everywhere, installations. Until about 15 years ago, nobody even knew what an installation was. Uh,
Do you know any specific video installation artists, either Bombay artists that are doing this or?
Everybody is using sort of this stuff in their work. So people are using elements of painting, but also installations. It's now spread across the board.
The what's happening in the marketplace as far as Indian art compared to maybe what was going on 10 years ago? I would imagine in the past it was largely foreigners, but now mean, market-wise, who's buying the stuff? And what's
Actually, Indian
happening
art
to
has
prices?
always been bought mainly by Indians.
Yeah.
There weren't that many Western collectors. And I think what's changing is there are more Western collectors
Really?
looking at
Okay.
Indian art now, along with expats who are driving the market up.
Okay.
Uh,
And,
I was just gonna say about prices, what's happening with prices lately on art?
yeah, so sort of Christie's and Sotheby's seem to hold auctions of Indian art quite regularly, along with local houses, and that's really pushed prices up. They're nothing compared to what Chinese artists regularly get at auction, but it's climbing.
Okay.
Uh,
yeah, I was curious, with this sort of climbing and rise in art market, are there schools either opening up or building larger programs now? Say if the economy's larger and perhaps, you know, the economy can support more artists or things like that, are more programs opening up to train students?
There are some. It's just that sort of we've had an incredibly long tradition of art education. The oldest art schools were set up about 150 years ago. So it's not as if sort of these guys are coming out of a fairly solid tradition already. Some of the schools are a little stodgy, and they probably have to update their programs. But I don't think there's been any lack of art education programs so far.
And so maybe some of the most well-known Indian artists, do they do their training domestically or do they go abroad and come back or?
The biggest names in the Indian scene now have all trained in Bombay. I have trained in India. The two of the most famous schools are the JJ School of Art in Bombay, which is about 150 years old, just over 150 years old, and the school in Baroda. Um, Increasingly, people are going abroad to study things like video art, for instance. But the biggest names in the Indian scene have all been trained locally.
And so, with prices going up, different mix of buyers, what is that an indicator of? Is that in fact an indicator of India's rise or the rise of a certain section of the population here?
Yeah, it's an indication that sort of more people see art as valuable. Uh, there are also lots of people who want to put pretty things on their walls,
Yeah.
and it'll take a while till it sort of pans out.
Mhm.
But it means that people are willing to put fairly adventurous, experimental things on their walls.
Yeah.
People who sort of something that makes a political statement, or
Yeah.
so. I mean, that's good.
I was going to move on to some rising things. So, I was curious.